members of parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, those tuned in to this meeting via all other means, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the continuation of this public meeting for today, Tuesday, August 13th. This is public meeting number 30. And at this time, I want to give a special welcome to the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Honorable Miklos Gitterson, and his support staff. As we have established a quorum of 8 members, I invite you to stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. Notice of absence has been received from the members Vigilani, Jacobs, and one of lateness from MP Tamara Leonard. Are there any notifications from the floor of Parliament? That not being the case, we continue with the agenda point for this meeting. And the agenda point is the current situation regarding Erfpacht land on St. Maarten, what is currently being collected, what is owed to the government, and policies by the Ministry of Romi to improve all of the above. The request for this meeting is registered under number 1032, and it is dated the 21st of May of this year. It was requested by the members of Parliament Bryson, Doran, Richardson, and Emmanuel. So going over to the agenda point, the meeting is a continuation of the meeting which was adjourned on May 29, 2019, to allow the minister time to prepare the answers to the questions posed by members of Parliament in the first round. On May the 21st, 2019, a letter was received from the members of Parliament mentioned, Bryson, Doran, Richardson, and Emmanuel, requesting that the urgent meeting of Parliament be convened to address the current situation with regard to Erfpacht, or leased land on St. Maarten, and the presence of the minister was requested. As I mentioned, this is document number 1032, dated May 21st. The meeting was first held on May 29. The Minister of VROMI, Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, gave a presentation. And after the presentation, members of Parliament were given the opportunity to pose questions to the Minister. The meeting was thereafter adjourned to allow the Minister time to prepare for the answers to the questions posed by members of Parliament. And so today, the Minister is here to provide Parliament with the answers to those questions posed during the first round of this public meeting. It is also good to note that the Secretariat of Parliament was provided with documents in relation to the answers to be presented by the Minister today, and these documents, members of Parliament, are registered under incoming document number 1375-1375, dated August the 13th. These documents have been forwarded to the members of Parliament by email. So at this time, I want to give the floor to the Minister, Minister Miklos Gitterson, for his opening remarks and answers to the questions posed by members of Parliament. Minister Gitterson, at this time, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair. Honorable members of Parliament, support staff, audience members viewing and listening. Before answering the specific questions of the members of Parliament, I would like to provide a brief general overview of the situation pertaining to domain lands on St. Maarten. I believe this would give some general context to the members of Parliament and may even answer many of the questions that were posed. This presentation will deal with the land holdings of government, long lease procedures, long lease canons, and the Department of Domain Affairs. Madam Chair, today I provided some slides, and I have our GIS officer, Mr. Johan Sidial here, who will provide Parliament with some images of the GIS portal that we use for some clarifications of what we will be discussing today. To begin with, relative to many other countries, the government of St. Maarten is not a large landowner. There is much more land in private ownership on St. Maarten than what is held as public land. With this, I refer, of course, to the lands that are developable for construction and otherwise. This does not include the beaches, the bays, and public roads that are mostly public lands. I provided a few maps that illustrate the locations of the areas that government owns significant tracts of land with an indication of where these parcels are issued in long lease. Please note that there may be some long lease parcels missing from the list, as this map is still under development, and some information may be lacking, but it gives a good overview. The areas that have been held relatively long in ownership by the government of St. Maarten and which have been used to issue in long lease to citizens are mainly Point Blanche, St. Peter's, Reward, Saunders, Fort William, Beacon Hill, Simpson Bay, and the Lowlands Maho area. In addition, many areas that were held in ownership by the government and have been used to develop and issue in long lease to citizens are ponds and lagoons that have been filled, such as Simpson Bay Lagoon, including Flamingo Pond, the Great Salt Pond, the Fubi Pond, the Fresh Pond, and the Cold Bay Pond. In this regard, it should be noted that the government is also owner of the internal waters and has issued various water parcels in long lease, such as in Great Bay, Little Bay, the Simpson Bay Lagoon, and the Oyster Pond. In more recent years, the government purchased several tracts of land for the purpose of specific urban development of some kind. These include the Cahill parcel, sports field, hospital, fire department, the schools, etc. Belvedere Phase 1 for housing and related functions. Sucker Garden, the old Upper Princess Quarter hotel property. 2 tracts at Hope Estate, for housing and community functions. In Cold Bay for community functions. In Zorg and Rust Dutch Quarter, there was a land swap for community functions. Voiced Estate, where they're busy now with the APS housing. And Emilia Wilson Estate, which is where the Rainforest Park and Conservation is. In very recent times, the government acquired the ownership of the so-called over-the-bank property, and this was acquired through a claim based on civil code procedure of unmanaged estate. In the case when an estate lacks ownership, or as they say in Dutch, onbeheerde nalatenschap. In such cases, the civil code stipulates that such properties become ownership of the country. It should be noted that there are still ongoing legal procedures and claims pertaining to this tract of land. Lastly, there may be several more scattered smaller parcels of land that the government holds in ownership, which were acquired through different legacy means. So in essence, as opposed to many other countries, the land tenure in St. Maarten is mostly private, whereas the government is also a private party that over the years has acquired various parcels of tract land, making it today the largest individual landowner. However, almost all the land acquired was already designated and oftentimes committed for specific purposes, as a result of which there is in general very little land belonging to government that can be made available in lease to citizens or companies. The most of the available government land, in other words, land that have not been issued to citizens or committed in some way, pertains to hillside land. Much of these lands were somehow already promised to individuals. However, in 1997, the government established the hillside policy that is aimed at the protection and conservation of some of the remaining green hills on St. Martin from development and urbanization. The hillside policy applies to all hillside land, so both private and public. For this reason, the government has been very reserved in the issuance of these land to citizens because the government also imposes the obligation of conservation on private landholders. A copy of the hillside policy is enclosed to the members of parliament, which is also downloadable from the government website. In addition, there is a beach policy in place since 1995, which aims to preserve the land for beaches for public use and free from construction works, which serve to prevent the issuance of part of the beaches to individuals for private use. The premise of the beach policy is that the beaches are public land and should always maintain a public character for nature and recreation, and free from all activities which would hinder the open public character. A copy of the beach policy, which is also downloadable from the government website, is also enclosed for members of parliament. It should be also noted that the beaches are protected by law, Civil Code Article 526, which stipulates that any burdening of beaches areas that removes the public character requires the approval of Parliament. The development of the Phillipsburg Boardwalk is such an example. That was subject to the approval of the then Island Council, based on which new parcels of land were created adjacent to the boardwalk and are transferred to adjacent private landholders. This also facilitated the construction of the boardwalk as a protection barrier and commercial revitalization of the capital. As was indicated, with some small exceptions, there are in general no open tracts of land of the government available to be issued in long lease. The procedure to obtain a parcel of land is to submit an application to the Minister of Rummy, which can be done by a simple letter or an application form that is downloadable from the government website. There are no written policies in place for the assignment of land to individuals. Therefore, this is at the discretion of the Minister of Rummy. The only guidance in this regard is the law comprising of Title 7 of Book 5 of the Civil Code and the so-called National Ordinance on Long Lease Issuance, or Long Lease Ordinance. A copy of the Long Lease Ordinance, which is also downloadable from the government website, is provided. Other than that, the spatial development policies, for example, the hillside policy, the beach policy, and the draft zoning plans are used to define the land use designations and conditions that are stipulated in long lease agreements. The Department of Domain Affairs advises on requests for the issuance of long lease land to individuals and other legal entities, and the Minister of Rummy issues a ministerial decree based on which long lease agreements are at the discretion of the Minister of Rummy to decide to which persons or companies long lease land will be issued. The prospective leaseholder is generally responsible for the costs associated with the measurement of the land and the legal establishment of the long lease agreement in the public registry at the cadastre. This is done by notarial deed and generally needs to be completed within a period of 6 months after the decree is issued. Other types of cases related to long lease that the department also advises on include the extension of the land with additional land, requests for changes of purpose on the land, long lease on water parcels, extensions of the long lease terms, subdivision of long lease parcels, renewals of expired long lease decrees not passed within 6 months, renewal of long lease agreements when they expire or near expiration, transfer of long lease land after they are developed, permission for condominiumization of buildings on long lease land, and rental agreements possible for a maximum of 5 years. The procedure for handling these cases are similar to the procedures for the first issuance of land in long lease. I can mention that because of the scarcity of land, of government land, the majority of the work of the department is currently centered around advising on these other types of transactions rather than many issuances of land for the first time. In terms of long lease canons, long lease tariffs are canons that are set up as compensation that the long leaseholder pays to the government for the lease of the land. The premise is set in Article 2 of the Long Lease Ordinance, which stipulates that the canon is based on 8% of the land value established by the minister to be paid to the government on a yearly basis. This provision implies that there is a certain discretion on the part of the minister with respect to the setting of the value of the land. While there is no written policy on this, in order to work with some guidance and consistency, about 20 years ago, a matrix was developed that gives guidance on the amount of the canon that is specified in lease agreements. The matrix distinguishes the value of the property by location and by the function or the land use purpose. A copy of this matrix is also provided to Parliament. Long lease agreements generally stipulate the possibility for the periodic change of the long lease canon. In the current practice, the canon is set for a period of minimum 5 years, after which it can be amended by the government if the need for this arises. However, the department has no recollection of any cases wherein it was decided to independently amend the long lease canon in lease agreements. So in fact, most of the applied canons are very old and therefore very minimal. The only cases wherein a change of the canon are imposed in long lease agreements are in the event of a change of purpose, a subdivision of the long lease parcel, or a renewal of the long lease term. The long lease ordinance stipulates that in the event of the change of purpose and the subdivision of a lease parcel, the conditions of the lease, including the canon, can be changed. In the case of renewal, this entails a new issuance of the land in long lease, whereas a new canon can also be imposed. The new canons used are then imposed based on a matrix provided to Parliament. The aerial images provided also include a schematic overview of the long lease canons in various areas. From a policy perspective, now about 20 years after the development of the matrix, it is time that the land values be updated and new policies are established pertaining to the manner in which long lease canons can be periodically amended in existing long lease agreements. In that respect, it is also time to modernize the long lease ordinance to enable the application of more actual land values, the formula for the calculation of the canons, and the procedures related to the establishment and amendment of long lease canons. Delving into the Department of Domain Affairs, the department has for most of its existence been understaffed and under-resourced. Although Domain Lands is responsible for almost 6 million guilders in revenues for the government annually and has the potential for easily doubling these annual revenues without placing an undue burden on the leaseholders. The department has a formation plan of 7 persons, but currently has an official staffing of 3 persons, including administrative staff. We are currently working on the formalization of the appointment of 1 person and the recruitment of another one, as well as the recruitment for officially filling the functions of head of the department. With the very limited resources, the department mainly focuses on the handling of the cases and has not been able to work on long lease policy. Therefore, Domain Affairs is actually devoid of formal policy on long lease land. With the current staffing and resources, the department is only able to work on incidental cases, whereas the workload of the department greatly exceeds its ability to respond. The department needs additional staffing in order to just adequately respond to the incoming workload, meaning working very reactively, while it does not have the ability to work proactively in the setting of policies. Also, in terms of the effective collection of long lease fees or canons, the department has a very limited role in this process. The role of the department is currently limited to providing the Department of Finance with a monthly overview of the long lease fees for due in the following month, based on the overview of long lease cases, which is processed by finance through the receiver, who is responsible for the collection. Domain Affairs has no information on the process thereafter. Therefore, if a leaseholder fails to pay the fees, this information is not conveyed to the department. As such, it is only on incidental cases when a specific request for information is made to the receiver that the department is informed on the status of payment of a particular leaseholder. The current amount of long lease cases is approximately 3,000. So the department only requests information in the event that a particular transaction is requested by a leaseholder, and otherwise assumes that the situation is under control by the receiver. However, this often proves not to be the case. In order to address the current shortcomings of the department, 4 general initiatives have been undertaken. A general assessment in 2015-2016 by KPMG of the functioning of the department to look for staffing, the administrative organization, policies and legislation, as well as resources to advise about an improvement plan. Unfortunately, the work of KPMG was ineffective, and this exercise failed to deliver a useful report. An advice in 2017 to recruit additional temporary staff above the regular formation of the department was also submitted. This advice was approved, but budget shortages prevent the department from acting effectively on this. An assessment in 2017 by SOAB of the collection system, which has resulted in an advice for improved policy, procedure, and especially IT resources to improve the long lease collection system, and given more ownership to Domain Affairs on the canon collection process was also submitted. This initiative has an estimated price tag of about 350,000 guilders, but also not been implemented as yet due to budget shortages. And a very recent engagement of the SOAB to develop a business plan for the improvement of the performance of Domain Affairs was also submitted, and this initiative is currently underway. The main common denominator that has obstructed the improvement initiatives thus far has been shortages of funds by the government to invest in the improvement of the functioning of the Department of Domain Affairs. The so-called skeleton budgets of the government have not provided the space needed to invest in the upgrades of the performance of the department. Decisions are needed to expand the formation and staffing plan of the department, and investments are needed in adequately staffing of the department with more qualified persons to effectively handle the workload and render better service to the public. Investments are needed in the resources of the department, most notably in the basic IT tools needed to carry out these works of the department more efficiently, also in the interest of expeditious responses to requests of citizens. Investments are needed to modernize the legislation, the policies, and the work procedures related to the work of the department, especially also including the procedures surrounding the management of the collection of the yearly long lease canons. Furthermore, effective policy in the area of long lease canons can more than double the annual projected revenues from the long lease in a manner that places very little burden on the leaseholders. I hope with this presentation opening, I have given some elucidation that can serve as a basis to somehow lead to increased budget reservations for the improvement of the functioning of the Department of Domain Affairs. I hope that some changes can come in very soon because the department, as the main revenue source of the Ministry of Rummy, has a lot of potential that we should reinforce. Madam Chair, I would go now directly into the answers of the questions that were posed by the members of Parliament and the questions from the invitation letter. Starting with the questions from the invitation letter. What is currently being collected for long lease land? Based on the registry of long leaseholders that is managed by the Department of Domain Affairs, the amount that should be collected on a yearly basis for long lease in 2019 is set in the budget at 5,810,255 guilders. This amount is based on the actual long lease agreements that were placed as of the time of the preparation of the budget for 2019. There are monthly mutations that take place to the amount that is due based on changes to existing or registrations of new long lease agreements in the system. In general, the long lease revenues will continue to increase over time based on the mutations made. The amount that is actually collected on a yearly basis may vary on delinquencies and payments by leaseholders that are experienced by the receivers, which affects the amount in a negative way. However, this can also vary by collections of multiple years of backlogs on outstanding amounts by the receiver, which affects the revenues in a positive way. So the actual amounts collected on a yearly basis will vary. Next, what is owed to the government? The Department of Domain Affairs has no actual real-time insight into the amounts owed to the government at this time. The amounts owed will need to be determined by a detailed analysis of all the long lease cases through a search of the Administration of Finance and the Receiver's Office. This is a very time-consuming process under the responsibility of the Ministry of Finance. A process like this was started in 2016, which led to the collection of a significant amount of arrears and long lease fees. Next, the letter of invitation asked, what are the policies by the government to improve all of the above? For the improvement in the collection of outstanding long lease fees, the department had the SOAB conduct an assessment of the procedures in the management of the collection of long lease revenues, with the aim of making recommendations for an improved system of long lease fees collection. A very comprehensive recommendation report was made for an integrated information system between Domain Affairs, Finance, and the Receiver's Office using Microsoft Dynamics CRM to improve the revenue management. Vromi is looking into securing the funds in the amount of approximately 350,000 guilders for the investments needed to implement this system. Other than this, there are no written policies on the management or administration of long lease land at the moment, and the basis we use for the management of long lease land is the law. This pertains to the National Ordinance on Issuance of Land in Long Lease, de landsverordening op uitgifte in erfpacht van gronden toebehorende aan St. Maarten, also known as the Long Lease Ordinance. This ordinance finds its origin in Title 7 of Book 5 of the Civil Code, and the ordinance is to be regarded as a special law with reference to the Civil Code, which is the general law. Moving on to MP Rolando Bryson's questions. What does receivers have to do with the policy for the issuance of government land? According to Article 6 of the National Ordinance on Long Lease Issuance, the lessee is obligated to pay their long lease fees in advance to the receiver's office. The current procedure is that the listing of long lease fees due in a particular month is sent in the prior month by the Department of Domain Affairs to the Department of Finance, who issues the instruction to pay to the leaseholder by letter. And the receiver is responsible for the collection of the fees due. Next, MP asks, how is the cost price of erfpacht calculated? Is there an appraisal guideline policy? Is it a minister's decision? Is it the department? The long lease canon is determined as 8% of the land value as established by the minister. A matrix of value has been established about 20 years ago, and that is based on the location and use of the land. However, this is applied to new long lease cases or to cases where a change of purpose or subdivision of an existing long lease parcel is requested by the leaseholder. For the large majority of leaseholders, the old canon still applies. Next, the MP asks, what are the policies, laws that govern this? Who determines policy handling this type of issue? There is no written policy that establishes the land values, but just the established unwritten policy based on the land value matrix. The long lease ordinance determines how the canon is calculated. Policies in the area of long lease are established by the Minister of Vromi or the Council of Ministers. Then MP asks, do people who owe money get a payment plan? The collection of long lease canons is the responsibility of the receiver, including the discretion to establish payment plans for outstanding payments. It is possible to receive a payment plan for payment of outstanding arrears. MP then asks, what about the national interest? Are there guidelines to getting back land if national interest dictates that they need to use that land? There are no specific guidelines or policies concerning reclaiming existing land for the national interest. This is handled on a case-by-case basis. That is based on the possibilities within the law. There are possibilities for termination of lease agreements. However, this would have to involve fair compensation of the leaseholder. Even at the end of a lease term, if a leaseholder has developed a lease property legally, then if the long lease is not renewed, the leaseholder will have to be compensated for the value of the development on the property. Next, MP asks, were you told by the individuals of Shipyard, Michael Ferrier, to pull back your decision? The proprietors of Shipyard requested a reconsideration of my initial decision not to renew the lease agreement with the company. MP then asked, what would be the intention for the use of this land if it is not returned to the owner as they requested it? All the properties along the northern side of the airport runway are part of a mid to long-term plan for the expansion of the airport. On the short term, the government wants to use a part of the land for the removal of the shipwrecks from the Simpson Bay Lagoon. Next, the MP asks, what are the plans of the World Bank on this property? The World Bank has allocated funds for the shipwreck removal project, and this property has been identified by the government as a suitable site for the project. That's it. Then MP Bryson asks, what opportunities are there for locals to apply and request this land? There are no opportunities for anyone to obtain long lease on land in this area at the moment because of the expansion plans of the airport, which is considered a national interest. The only reason a midterm lease renewal to the shipyard would be considered is because they are an existing operation at the site. Furthermore, all issuance of permission to use land in the area should and is being granted with prior consultation and cooperation of the airport. MP then asked, can the minister confirm if it's the intention of the company to sublease the land to World Bank and or the airport? At the moment, the plans are actually the other way around. Namely, it is the intention to issue the land in long lease to the holding company of the airport, while the airport may give a midterm lease to the shipyard. In this manner, the long-term interest, of the airport will be safeguarded. The premise of any land lease arrangement would be that the government will be able to use part of the land for the shipwreck removal project free of cost. Next, MP Claude Peterson asks, what is the total outstanding amount owed for long lease? Domain Affairs does not have an overview of the total outstanding amounts for long lease. This information could be obtained through the Finance Department or the Receiver's Office, but it would take some time because it's very time consuming to compile. It would entail an assessment of all long lease cases, which consists of about 3,000. And Domain Affairs usually queries the receiver's office on a case-by-case basis, depending on requests of leaseholders for particular transactions. It is a standard procedure that for many transactions requested by a leaseholder, if the government cooperates, it will be on the premise that all lease canon payments are up to date. In 2016, a project was started to assess the total outstanding amounts of the long lease with an aim to begin collection procedures. This was effective for several of the larger cases in the Registry of Domain Affairs, but at a point, the workload involved got too time-consuming for the receiver's office, and the project was not further pursued. In this respect, one phenomenon has also been discovered that the Registry of Domain Affairs is not complete. This has occurred over the years with several parcels of land being issued to leaseholders outside of the procedures of Domain Affairs, as a result of which some lease agreements are not registered at Domain Affairs. The result is that the department is not aware of all the cases and does not send a notice to the receivers in these cases for collection of the yearly long lease canon. The amount of these cases is considered to be very small and is corrected when this is detected. However, to get a complete overview of these cases, the government needs to also conduct a very detailed survey with the cadastre of all domain lands to compare with its own registry. The department currently lacks the staff and resources to carry out this survey given the current workload of the department. MP then asked, what are the policies? This question was previously answered. There are no written domain land policies. MP asked, what is the price of long lease on the zip line in Cul-de-sac? I take that the MP is referring to the Rainforest Adventure Park. The Rainforest Adventure Park has the parcel certificate of measurement 265 of 2014 with an area of 357,196 square meters in long lease for a canon of 1 guilder 20 per square meter. So far, a total of 428,635 guilders and 20 cents per year has been collected. It should be noted that less than 5% of the land that is issued in long lease to the park is being used for development. The allowable development on the site is for an eco-adventure and nature park. The Rainforest Adventure Park has the obligation to cooperate with the St. Maarten Nature Foundation for the realization and management of a nature park on a section of the project site, the CMARC Foundation for research and preservation of any archaeological artifact that may entail cultural historical significance on the project site, the St. Maarten National Historical Foundation for the historical significance and preservation of monuments on the project site, the Emilio Wilson Cultural and Historical Park Foundation for the development and management of the Emilio Wilson Cultural Park on the adjacent property, and the Emilio Wilson Estate Foundation. Next, the MP asks, how does that square meter price compare to what is being paid now for long lease? Has the price gone up for people who has had long lease, for example, for 20 years as well? Or is it only for new persons who receive long lease? That price is comparable to the new residential long lease canon in certain areas in the cul-de-sac that are provided with infrastructure and are allowed to develop, for example, 50% of the total parcel of long lease land. The price per square meter is significantly higher than the large majority of existing long lease cases. While the possibility exists for government to increase the lease cost of government land, the government has never independently done this with existing long lease cases. The new lease canons, which were established about 20 years ago, are only imposed to new cases of long lease, or in the event of a request for a change of purpose or subdivision of land for an existing long lease parcel. Next, the MP asks, what is the policy of the ministry when it comes to allocating long lease to civil servants and civil servants' immediate family members? There are no specific policies in regard to allocating government land to civil servants in long lease. Moving on to MP Doran, who asked, how much is government owed for long lease right now for residential and commercial? This question has been answered. Domain Affairs does not have an overview of the outstanding balances for long lease. This information needs intensive research at the receivers and finance departments. MP then asks, does your ministry plan to increase the fees for long lease land? There are no plans at this time to increase the long lease fees. There are plans to prepare a more detailed and explicit policy on long lease canons, as well as possibly amending the legislation to allow a more objective application of the policy. The MP then asks, are there any laws to obtaining long lease land? The laws that are applicable are the Long Lease Ordinance and Title 7 of Book 5 of the Civil Code. MP then asks, is it deemed unlawful to go against an advice to give long lease land? A minister can decide to deviate from an advice about long lease land in the interest of good governance. It is advisable that when a minister deviates from an advice, that this is explicitly and properly motivated. Next, the MP asks, what is this, the hillside policy? When was this approved and by whom? A copy of the hillside policy is provided to the members of parliament. The hillside policy is a policy aimed at protection of the natural character of the hillsides from overdevelopment. It is a framework that guides the manner in which land in the hills are developed and is mostly aimed at the review of development plans and building permits, but is also used as a basis for decisions related to the issuance of long lease land. The hillside policy was approved by the Executive Council of the former island territory of St. Maarten and published in 1997. Next, the MP asks, how many long lease land did you approve or grant to persons, both residential and commercial? In my time as minister, I have approved 9 new long lease issuances, 2 of which were water parcels as an extension to adjacent private land. The other 7 were decisions made to formalize decisions by previous ministers. They were mostly decree renewals. Next, MP Tamara Leonard asked, what are the prices for both commercial and residential? The new long lease canon depends on the location and the type of allowable use on the land. A matrix is provided of the canons. So this is provided to Parliament. Next, MP asks, how is the price determined? Is it based on size of the land or purpose? The amount of the canon per square meter depends on the purpose and location of the land. The total amount of the canon is also dependent on the size of the land. Next, MP asks, when did the increase in prices happen and who made that decision? What is currently regarded as the new canon is the matrix that has been used for about the last 20 years. This is mainly applied to new issuances of land in long lease, but can also be imposed on existing or old long lease agreements in the event of a request for change of purpose or subdivision of existing long lease parcels. Next, MP Christophe Emmanuel asks, when did the lease for Pasagran Hotel on Front Street expire? The Pasagran long lease expired on February 28, 2017. Next, the MP asks, have you had a discussion with Pasagran about extending the lease? Together with the ministry, I have had several discussions with the representatives of Pasagran Hotel about renewal of the long lease agreement for the property. Next, the MP asks, why are you encouraging splitting of the property of Pasagran Hotel? The Pasagran Hotel is situated on a parcel of land described in Certificate of Measurement 30 of 1956, with a size of 2,320 square meters. The right of long lease was issued in the year of 1957 for the price of 3 cents guilders per square meter. A total amount of 75 guilders was being paid for the whole parcel in long lease, 75 guilders a year. The long lease right was transferred to Pasagran Hotel in 1971. The so-called Royal Guest House, which occupies approximately 250 square meters of the full parcel, was designated as a protected monument, I believe, around in 2009, many years after 1971. Only the Royal Guest House was landmarked, as a monument, not the rest of the property, which currently is developed with several multi-story commercial and hotel building structures. The canon price remained the same for the entire period of the long lease, which was 75 guilders a year, and the long lease expired 2 years ago, February 2017. The process we are in now is the renewal of the long lease on the property, whereas new conditions can now be imposed. Based on the matrix provided to Parliament, the current price for long lease owners in Phillipsburg is 10 guilders a square meter. This means that the canon would significantly increase. Considering the commercial use of the property, we suggested to split up the parcel as it is only the Royal Guest House that is designated as a protected monument. It was suggested that for this part of the property, because of the obligations of the property owner with respect to the protected monument, a more moderate long lease canon can be applied. We do not believe that the entire of the remainder of the property, which is not designated as a protected monument, but is used for commercial hotel purposes, should be exempted from the regular canon that is applied to all other new similar cases in Phillipsburg. However, in an effort to moderate the drastic increase in the long lease, I have decided to renew the long lease on the property based on a phased implementation of the new canon. I have issued a decree wherein the new canon will be 2 guilders per square meter for the first 5 years, 5 guilders per square meter for the following 5 years, and 10 guilders per square meter after a period of 10 years. I believe this gives the developer a fair chance to reconstruct the building that was damaged by the hurricanes before adjusting to the actual new canon to be imposed in 10 years' time. Next, the MP asked, do you know that Paso Grande is a monument and as such should be given all requisite attention to maintain its position and standing as a monument? I am aware of this, I am well aware of this, and this is the reason some consideration is given to the case of Paso Grande. This is also the reason it was suggested that the monument, approximately 250 square meters, be split off from the rest of the long lease land and exempted from the canon. However, this proposal was not acceptable to the developer. Next, the MP asked, did Great Bay request permission to sell their property or to sell their rights of long lease land? No, MP, there is no request to transfer the land from former Great Bay Beach Hotel. The long lease holder is still Balaclava NV. Next, the MP asked, is the ownership in the long lease to Great Bay or the government? Is the ownership in the long lease to Great Bay or the government? If so, how long and did they pay or have been paying for it? A part of the long lease for Balaclava NV in Great Bay was recently renewed, and a part was issued newly in long lease. The yearly long lease payments for Balaclava for the planned hotel property are current. The property pertains to a parcel of land that were apparently issued in long lease in 1965. The property was obtained by Balaclava NV through an auction in 1975. Next, the MP asked the tennis court and parking lot. Were they granted to Sonesta in long lease? If yes, when? The property of the former tennis court and parking lot have been issued in long lease to Balaclava NV, not Sonesta, in December 2018. This parcel have been part of the business operations of the hotel for many years and was recently formalized in a long lease agreement. Next, the MP asks, there are rumors about the boatyard strong-arming the minister into granting a 12-year long lease. The boatyard owes government about 3 million guilders and will pay that if government grants the boatyard a 12-year long lease. The former Minister of Finance has asked the new Minister of Rummy to extend the long lease. How much does the boatyard owe? The outstanding balance for St. Martin Shipyard NV is 1,250,070 guilders. That's it. MP asks, when was the last time they paid government? The last time they partially paid the long lease canon was in 2015. MP then asks, what is more important, granting the 12-year lease or expanding the airport? The expansion of the airport is very important. This is the reason that if the issuance of the lease to the shipyard is completed, this will be done in close cooperation with the airport to ensure that the expansion plans and interests are fully protected. It is deemed unlawful for a minister to go against an advice or to grant long lease land. This was asked by MP Emmanuel, and this is the same question that was answered already. A minister can decide to deviate from an advice about long lease land. However, in the interest of good governance, it is advisable that when a minister deviates from an advice, this is explicitly and properly motivated. Is there a law to grant long lease? Is there a policy to grant long lease land? At whose prerogative is it to grant long lease land? There is a long lease ordinance that regulates the issuance and management of long lease properties. There are some unwritten policies or common practices, but there are no written policies to guide the management of long lease properties. Based on the long lease ordinance, it is the prerogative of the Minister of Rummy to decide in long lease cases within the confines of the principles of good governance, reasonableness, fairness, and the general interest. Next, MP asks, is it your intention or the intention of the ministry to increase the long lease canon? If yes, in which locations? No, there are no such plans. Next, the MP asks, the receiver has the financial part of what is owed to government, but doesn't Domain Affairs have the catalog of information in terms of who has or owns long lease land? Yes. The administration of long lease property holders is at the Department of Domain Affairs. Next, the MP asks, how many properties have requested an extension of long lease land? How many were granted from First Caribbean to Great Bay? The area that the MP refers to in the question is not clear, but it is assumed that it is referring to the area along the beachfront of Great Bay. As can be seen from one of the images provided to Parliament today, the beachfront area has close to 80 parcels, and about 8 of these pertain to long lease property. The sandbank area of Phillipsburg is mostly private property. Of the cases mentioned, there have been no other recent requests with the exception of the transactions with Balaclava, NV, and Paso Grande Hotel. A general overview of the properties held in long lease in Phillipsburg has been provided. And it's behind the members of Parliament. I don't know, the screen on this side isn't in function, but the hard copies are also provided to all members of Parliament. Next, MP Emmanuel asked, the filling in by Bobby's Marina, is it legal, is it illegal, or not? Bobby's Marina is in the process of having the long lease properties that the company occupies regulated. This is a process that has been going on for many years and has remained unresolved. I have been in consultation with the developer and have recently approved a draft decree for long lease for the property in question, and the certificates of measurements are being prepared. The developer has submitted plans for the development of the area, but these have not been formally approved as yet because the underlying long lease agreement is still pending. Therefore, formally, the filling in is not being done with the official approval of RUMI, but it is being done in accordance with the development plans submitted for approval. Next, MP William Marlin asked, can you provide the Parliament with an overview of how many parcels in long lease government has? The registry at the Department of Domain Affairs has a total of approximately 3,000 long lease cases registered. This registry is not perfect and is still being refined, but it is the most correct overview we have available. If necessary, this list can be provided. MP Marlin then asked how much is supposed to be collected from those parcels. Based on the information from Domain Registry, approximately 5.8 million guilders should be collected by the government on an annual basis. MP Marlin then asked how many are in the rears. As I have stated to previous similar questions, Domain Affairs does not have an overview of the amount of long lease cases in arrears, as this is only requested from the receiver's office on a case-by-case basis. The receiver also cannot supply this overall information on short term, as this will require significant research of all the cases. Domain Affairs has requested this in the past, but it could not be provided. MP then states to provide an overview of the different levies. I have provided the matrix which illustrates the new long lease canons that are used. MP then asks when and how is the amount, the price adjusted. The new canons established about 20 years ago are used for all issuances of long lease. A renewal of long lease agreement is regarded as a new issuance. An old existing canon can be adjusted to the new canon in the event of a change of purpose or a subdivision of a long lease parcel. MP then asks, is it policy that long lease canon is increased? How is it calculated? Based on the explanations I have provided, the canon is essentially at the discretion of the minister. However, in the interest of consistency, the matrix that was provided is the basis for setting of the new canons in long lease agreements. This is calculated based on the allowable use or purpose of the land, the size of the land, and the applicable canon. The practice is that in all new cases, the new canons are applied, as well as in the event of a change of purpose and a subdivision of long lease parcels. Under normal circumstances, even when a leaseholder requests permission to transfer a leased property, the new canon is not applied. However, if upon inspection it is detected that the allowable purpose or use of the land was changed without the explicit permission of government, this can be corrected and the new canon imposed in these cases as well. In the practice, this can be done with a retroactive effect of maximum 5 years if it is detected that the change of purpose without approval existed for many years. As indicated, the canons are the discretion of the Minister of RUMI, and therefore there is some variation possible on a case-by-case basis if the situation is regarded to warrant this, such as, for example, in the case of Pasagran, as was previously explained. Next, MP asks, how can the canon be adjusted for locals and not for companies who make millions? There is no distinction in origin of persons or companies when applying the long lease canons. The changes are uniformly applied only in instances as I described previously, regardless to the person, company, or their origin. Then MP Jules James asked, how many long lease owners do we have? Based on the Registry of Domain Affairs, there are approximately 3,000 long lease cases. Can the minister outline what formula is being used currently or been adapted to calculate FPA canon in different districts? Yes, this is based on the matrix of location and land use provided. Then MP asks, provide a detailed explanation of economic rights to the long leasehold. Economic rights to property is regulated in the Civil Code. This is not yet regulated within the framework of long lease land and therefore does not fall yet under the jurisdiction of domain lands, but is also not prohibited. It is of late more frequent practice that this is used and should be regulated within the framework of laws pertaining to long lease of domain lands. Then MP asks, what is being charged in Maho area? The price for long lease in lowlands area based on new canons indicated in the matrix provided is 8 guilders per square meter for residential purposes and 12 guilders per square meter for commercial purposes. The price currently being paid by the Maho Group for the main parcel based on their long lease agreement from 1967 is 1 guilder cent per square meter. This has been adjusted to the new canons for various parcels that have been subdivided or for which the land use purpose has changed. We are currently in discussion with the developer about the renewal of the long lease term and the canon for the main parcel. Then MP Jacobs asks, is it so that the land below the airport, west of the airport, is recognized as government long lease land, airport to the border? So I'm assuming that MP meant Maho, Mullet Bay, Coopercoy, well, maybe Beacon Hill. Some of the land in that area is government land, but mostly the land in that area is private land. A general overview of the government land in that area has been provided to all MPs. Then MP asks, if the land is government land, is there still any land available to be leased to individuals or companies? Is it zoned for specific purposes? There is, to the knowledge of Domain Affairs, no open land in that area for issuance in long lease, or is otherwise not already issued in long lease. There is also no zoning plan in effect for that area as yet. Then last, MP Arian asked, are there plans for raising long lease fees? This question was answered to previous questions. No, there are no plans to raise the long lease fees from the canon prices that are set in the matrix provided. MP then asks, was or is this recommendation of the World Bank? Was or is this a recommendation of the World Bank, or was this already an existing plan? There is no such plan, and I am not aware of any such recommendations of the World Bank to this effect. MP then asked the tennis court, was there a new made brief issued for the tennis court this year? Yes, there is a new certificate of admeasurement, which is 63 of 2019, issued for the former tennis court and parking lot of Great Bay Beach Hotel. MP then asked, is there any truth to members of the cabinet strong-arming the public? And I am not aware of such information. Madam Chair, this concludes my answers to the questions posed by members of Parliament.
Thank you, Minister, for the answers provided. At this point, does any member have a point of clarification, a vraagpunt in connection with what the minister has responded? We have MP Doran who has a point of clarification. Please state your point, MP.
Good afternoon to you, Madam Chair Lady, to my honorable colleagues, to the honorable minister's support team, and everyone tuned in. I have a few points for clarification that I would like the minister to clear up. And through you, Madam Chair, to the minister. Minister, you made mention that the only way Shipyard NV would be considered for renewal is because they are already occupying the property. And this would, I'm assuming, based on what you said, make it easier. But then at the same time, along the other questions, you mentioned that they owe 1.3 million. Now, if you ask me, you're sending a bad message out there. I mean, we should be more focusing on the compliance before we plan to renew. So I would like for you to clarify if is that what you meant. In regards to my question about the how much is owed right now in general by everyone that is leasing land, you stated that you cannot get the information because it's from receivers and it's short notice. But this meeting was in May. So you have May, June, July, August. I still feel that there should have been some effort made by the ministry to get this information. And if it can still happen, I would please like that answer. In regards to a minister deviating from the advice, you made mention as long as it is explicitly motivated. I would like to know who determines if it is explicitly motivated. Is it the council of ministers, the parliament, the kingdom government, the governor, who? I would like to know who determines if it is properly motivated. With regards to the question about the lease land, I think it was in the presentation then, you said lease land is granted, some committed, and some promised. I would like to know, when you say promise, verbally written, how is it promised to certain individuals? And based on the question that I asked in terms of long lease that was granted, you said that you said 7 parcels and 2 that were water rights, if I'm not mistaken. And I would like to know, if you don't own the land that you're on and it's adjacent to water, can you then, as the person that's paying the lease, attain the water rights without owning the land connected to the water rights? That would be all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Doran. We also have MP Bryson with points of clarification. MP Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and good afternoon to you, the Secretary General, my fellow honorable members of Parliament, to the Honorable Minister and his team. First of all, thank you very much for your opening presentation. I think it was very interesting to see that perspective. I'm actually not too sure if those following on Facebook were able to watch as well, but you know me, I'm the type of person I always like to see the use of technology help to bring about the message. So for that, I must say I appreciate that, and that did answer a lot of my questions. However, there are a few points that were not clear to me. Minister, Madam Chair, through you, the minister mentioned that the shipyard NV is an existing operation, therefore the reasoning for, let's say, the proposal to give it to the airport and then give it to shipyard NV. However, Madam Chair, the minister also mentioned in the first round of this, in his initial presentation, that shipyard NV, and actually during the budget debate as well, that I can pull up the exact date, that the lease of that property expired on September 21st, 2018. So if I look at the dates there, Madam Chair Lady, that tells me that they are no longer a leaseholder. Expired means exactly that, expired. So can you please clarify for me why you stated that they are currently operating? Because if that's the case, are you telling us that they're illegally continuing to operate despite the fact that that lease has expired? So that definitely needs some clarification. 1 second. Madam Chair Lady, the minister mentioned the beach policy, and I've heard in the past, in previous presentations, specifically during the 2018 budget debate, talk of a beach ordinance. So something that now a draft legislation. Can the minister indicate if the beach policy, which he mentioned, if there's any plans from the VROMI side for stronger ordinances to protect our beaches, and if that is in line with everything you stated about the beach policy? And you mentioned the beach policy. I understand that's under TIAT. Is there, by any chance, a separate beach policy that exists under VROMI? Just to understand which beach policy we're talking about. Madam Chair Lady, the minister mentioned a matrix with regards to the canon. Let me just state, at least for my person, the documents, Madam Chair, that the minister mentioned too, I haven't personally received them yet. Maybe they're still processing, but if we can just double check that. But I didn't get them in my email. Could be something else wrong. But nonetheless, just to understand that canon, were appraisals or sample appraisals done in any way to have a professional say, well, government, this is the value of land and this is what it should be based on? So what was the premise behind that matrix? How did we come up with these numbers? Similar clarification is requested with regards to Pass and Gran. You mentioned the numbers that were given, and I think it's fair that it's going up. I think the number is low and it's going up gradually. But what is that based on? And just would like to know if we have any formula for that, and if not, then maybe Parliament has to step in and see how we can help create such a formula. Madam Chair, the minister mentioned that it is primarily the receivers that handles the collection. Just to clarify, who issues the leases? Is it the Ministry of VROMI that issues the lease? And if the answer is yes, based on the number of leases we have, can we get that number? So please just, if the minister can forget about the budget for a second, because that's not a budget I approved and I believe in that budget. So I want to go based on what the minister tells me, the total number of leases. Is that indeed correct? Is what the budget reflected correct of what you actually have in leases? So that's what I'm trying to ascertain. I would like the minister to recall that that number has fluctuated. Remember last year was around 7 million and it became 5.3. So that's why I want to hear from the minister of VROMI, what is the total leases based on what you have signed? If, Madam Chair, that requires some more information or more time to not make this meeting drag on any longer, I would be happy to receive that particular answer in writing, if they need time to tabulate and calculate. That'll be all for clarifications, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. We continue, and MP Emmanuel has a point of clarification or points of clarification. MP Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and good afternoon to everyone, the Honorable Minister and his support staff, my honorable colleagues, and everyone who's watching and listening here today. Minister, I really appreciate the presentation. I don't say that much to when individuals come in here and present, but I understand in details, and it was clear to me exactly where you was going and the things you were saying. I only wish it was done much earlier in your tenure. But I only have two clarification or 2 points that I want to bring across, Madam Chair. And the first one really is specifically with the Bobby's Marina, the question that I asked in terms of the filling in that is happening right there. You didn't answer the question in terms of it being a legal fill in. You went on that the ministry is trying to this and trying to that. And I know that you know, I also have been dealing with that issue. And I know for a fact it's not a legal fill-in. He doesn't have the rights to fill it in because he doesn't own it. That's why I asked the question. And because of that, what is the ministry doing about it? And I know I know a stop was given at one point in time, but that's why I'm asking the question. And I can also appreciate the fact that the deliberation you make with Pastor Grant on how it should go, I would deem it sort of being fair. I can see that, and I can see where you were going with that. But I can also understand their concern, because here they are with Pastor Grant and the history and everything behind it, but Bobby is not paying anything. He doesn't pay anything. And I know that, you know that, and the whole ministry knows it, because it has been so for a number of years. So I can understand their concern if their fees have to go up in terms of paying the canon, and then nothing is happening on that side, right in front of her, right in front of the beach with Bobby's Marina. So I can understand that part. So what I'm saying, you said that the ministry is looking into whatever can be done. And I know that your time is short in terms of being minister, but I don't see nothing happening again. And the reason why I'm saying that, Madam Chair, is because in this country, we seem to have a few untouchables that can do whatever they want, when they want, how they want, and get away with it, and we just sort of close our eye in the things that are to what they are doing. And in this case, this is one of them. So again, the question that I ask, is it illegal filling that is happening there and up at Bobby's Marina? Also, the other question where I want to go is when you say you're not aware of being strong arm or anything. But so now I would like to ask the letter that was sent to the Council of Ministers by Michael Ferry, and it has attention to your person as the Honorable Minister, Environment Infrastructure Minister, Mr. Miklos Gittison, where he made mention of a number of things in this.
MP, could you wrap your
Yes.
clarification
Sorry.
question?
Yes,
please?
yes. So I want to know if you're aware of this document. Did you get this document? And what is your opinion on this document? Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Christophe Emmanuel. Minister, are you able to go into the points on which clarification have been requested? You need a few minutes for that, then we can adjourn for 10 minutes? Okay, let's adjourn until 4 p.m. and see if you are next 13 minutes. This meeting is adjourned until 4 p.m. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hereby reopen this meeting of Parliament as we continue on the agenda point for today, during which the Minister of Vromi, Minister Gitterson, has been responding to questions by members of Parliament posed in the first round of this meeting. The minister has answered these questions, and just before the break, some points of clarification were raised to which the minister will now respond. Minister Gitterson, I invite you to respond to the points of clarification made by members of Parliament.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will go straight into clarifications. First up, MP Doran wanted clarified shipyard NV because they are already occupying the property and they can get the land while they owe compliance before renewal. Is that what I meant? He wanted that clarified. The proposal is that compliance is a condition for the renewal, MP, including the obligation to remain current. So meaning it is part of the condition that we are awarding, that we offering them to comply with it. MP then asked for clarification, the time passed to get the information from the receiver. Can this still happen? As I stated, we requested this information and we even went through an extensive months-long process with the receiver's office to get this information. This is not possible to obtain on short term. Receivers indicated not to have the staff to do so, and also on domain side, it is short-staffed for this process to even assist the receiver's office. We prefer to tackle this with the project I mentioned that was designed by the SOAB. MP then asked, minister deviating from the advice as long as explicitly motivated, as long as it is explicitly motivated. Who determines if it is properly motivated? The law gives the guidelines about this. It is always the discretion of the minister until it becomes a court case. And then the judge will determine if the motivation is sufficient or not. MP then asked, lease land promise, how is this promised? This is usually when applicants receive a signed decree and this is allowed to expire. Long lease decrees expire after a period of 6 months, and often the applicants do not manage to get the deed passed within that period of time, and this is considered a promise. MP then asks, if you don't own the land that you are on, but are paying the lease, can you obtain the water parcel adjacent in long lease? And I would ask the MPs to please look at the slide behind them, which would give a perfect example of such case. This is Point Pirouette. What you see now in the lighter green is, or in all green I should say, is long lease land, domain land, sorry. The layer that was just switched off is domain land that is not collected as yet. So everything that you see there is private land, which is adjacent to domain land, and because the water parcels are adjacent to your property or a specific private property, it would mean that only you would be the right person to request it, if you understand what I'm saying. Through you, Madam Chair. Right? Good. So based on the practice of the government and domain affairs, the owner of the adjacent parcel can request the water rights So someone else paying a lease on behalf of someone else normally does not come into consideration to get the water parcel in long lease. It is only because it would be adjacent to your land. MP Bryson then asked for clarification on the shipyard is an existing operation, therefore the reasoning that they can get the land. But in first round and budget debate stated that the lease expired in 2018. Please clarify how they are currently operating. Is it illegally continuing to operate? A long lease agreement, unless explicitly terminated, will automatically, tacitly be renewed. The operators have continued to operate on the property based on several requests over the years for renewal or extension to the lease term. This is basically custom based on civil law. In normal circumstances of long lease, there will be a structure built on the property for which government will need to compensate the leaseholder if the lease is not renewed. A good example of this is the Pasagran property, which is also an expired agreement. There is no structure on shipyard property, but it is long lease, so the customs of long lease apply. MP then asked beach policy, beach ordinance. Is there any plans for Vrummy for stronger laws to protect the beaches? Is there a separate policy on beaches under Vrummy? The beach policy of Vrummy, of which a copy was provided, was established since 1995. The beach policy of Tayat concerns the possibility for vending on the beaches and is a much more recent policy in time. And yes, Vrummy will continue to strengthen the laws to protect the beaches. MP then asked, I have not received the matrix as yet. It was provided to Parliament, so I would ask you to check with them. Were appraisals done to have a professional say based on value of land? What was the premise? About 20 years ago, I am informed that there were discussions with appraisers about the land values. This would appear to have been the basis to establish these values and canons. However, it will take some investigation to confirm this. Then MP asked, similar for Pasagran, what is that based on? What is the formula? This is based on the discretion of the minister, using the new canons and the long lease ordinance, and using fairness, taking the specific situation of Pasagran into consideration. MP then asked, primarily receiver that handles collection, but who issues the leases? Can we get numbers from that? Is the total number of leases correct based on the budget? The numbers I have provided is based on the information from Domain Affairs, about 3,000 long lease cases with an annual revenue at present of just over 5.8 million guilders. Then MP Emmanuel asked, Bobby's Marina in terms of filling, is it illegal or not? Based on the expiration of Article 28A of the zoning ordinance, there is no legal premise on administrative law to regard the filling as illegal. However, based on civil law, Bobby's Marina is using property that he does not hold in long lease. Therefore, he does not have the permission from the landowner, being government, to use the property. However, as I stated, a draft long lease decree was issued to Bobby's Marina, and the certificates of admeasurements are being prepared to finalize the lease title. So, therefore, the filling is being done within the context of these building plans that have been submitted for approval. MP then wanted to clarify concerns of Pasagran. While Bobby is not paying anything, we seem to have some untouchables in the country. This is one of them. Is it illegal filling at Bobby's Marina? And this was previously answered in the previous question. MP then want to clarify, not aware of being strong-armed, the letter that was sent to COM by Michael Ferrier, are you aware of this document? I am aware of the letter from Shipyard to COM, but the question was if I'm aware of the cabinet strong arming. And to this, I stated that I am not aware of it. That concludes the clarifications, Madam Chair. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for those clarifications. We now go over to round 2. In this meeting, a reminder, members of Parliament, that the speaking time in the second round is 10 minutes per member of Parliament. We follow the list of speakers for this meeting, and I start with giving the floor to MP Rolando Bryson. MP Bryson, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady, and a good afternoon once again to all members of Parliament, yourself, the Secretary General, Honorable Minister of Romy, and your support team, and those following us by various media. Madam Chair, let me just first of all say once again, I really appreciate the use of the GIS system here in Parliament. I think it was very good. I was able to actually go back on the live stream and see that it's being followed with the skills of our good friend Alvin, bouncing between the speeches and the screen, so that's very good. I am going to ask, Madam Chair, with your indulgence, in one of the questions I'm going to be posing, one of the statements I'm going to be making, if it's even possible that the property area known as Mullet Bay, if that can be pulled up on screen, if it's not a problem, if it's possible at all, if the members team can do that, because I'm going to be going into that in just a moment. Madam Chair, but before I move to that, I want to also mention, and other members of Parliament to make note of this, a lot of what we're hearing here today and learning, and we learned it also during the budget debate, there's some issues that we also have to address on the finance side of things and the receivers department, and their policies and choosing when and where, who they collect from, who they don't collect from. I think a follow-up meeting is now necessary based on the information we have here to now go into what is the receivers doing about this. So I want to make mention of that. That's, I think, the next action point that we have to take. Also, on this issue of an existing operation, Madam Chair Leader, the Minister says yes, but a lease, if not, can be continued, etc. Madam Chair, the Minister has a letter that was sent to the group informing them that the lease would not be renewed. Madam Chair, that letter stood firm, and only when the letter from Michael Ferrier went to the Council of Ministers, the same one that he referred to in answering the clarification of MP Emmanuel, it is only at that point the minister was probably told or pushed a strong arm or whatever you want to call it to try to change his mind. Madam Chair, Lady, through you, I would say to the minister, if it's one thing I could give you credit for, is for standing firm and not letting their political games and their political pressure make you bow to it. Because if your decision to resign and you've made that decision on your own conscience and you leave the government today, you can leave proud saying you did not. You were a minister that did not give in to that nonsense that has punished St. Maarten and its people for so many years. For that aspect, Madam Chair, through you to the minister, very good job. And I'm proud of you for staying strong and not giving in to that craziness it was trying to put on you. Now they want to say because you're the missionaire, they want to maybe make their own decisions. We will deal with them on that. So let us handle that. But once again, good job, and I'm proud of you in that regard. Madam Chair, I want to focus the rest of my presentation on the property of Mullet Bay, because I believe there's a mistake in the GIS, and that's my position from a legal and from a parliamentary perspective. Because as you can see, in the GIS that we have, and thank you very much for pulling it up, Mr. Brown, this area that is the beach is not in green. That area that's the inland waterway is not in green. In other words, what should be, and the minister stated it earlier, the coastline and inland waterways, as per Book 5 of the Civil Code, are assumed to be the ownership of St. Maarten, the country. Before 10-10-10, that would be the Netherlands Antilles. In order to change that, what you would need is a Landsverordening, which at the time would be from the Netherlands Antilles. All of my research has shown this has never been done. And since 10-10-10, it would have required a decision from Parliament for the beach and the lagoon and the coastline and what we know as a shark hole and all of that, that is illegally being called under the ownership of Sun Resorts. That is wrong. And Madam Chair Lady, I was very happy to hear when the decision of the courts, which even Sun Resorts choose not to challenge because they know what road they was going to go down, against the York family who challenged it in court, the decision of the judge concurred that Sun Resorts and their false claim all these years that, oh, but we got a mate brief that goes into the water. No, that is not sufficient proof in the eyes of even the courts to say that you own this property. This here is a major problem in this country that has to be addressed. It has been ignored for decades. Even before Mullet Bay was developed, this was a problem. And Madam Chair Lady, I have made a promise to the people of St. Maarten that I'm going to do everything I can to right this wrong, because it is unacceptable that the most valuable, most beautiful property I consider in the entire Caribbean is the way it is today. And as a member of parliament, and as all members of parliament, I think we have to go to the furthest possible lengths we have to correct this malady that we have here. Madam Chair Lady, the central bank in their meeting with us here about the Enya group, they acknowledged that one of the key factors that they outlined that identified to them that Enya was overinflating the value of Mullet Bay was that the appraisals being used by the Enya group included the beach, so all of the sand that you see there, not the golf course and so on. If they want to argue that that's theirs, I'll say patience on that. But their valuations included the water rights, the beach, the lagoon, the island in the middle, the sand, the coastline, the coral reef, everything. Madam Chair Lady, if you give that to an appraiser, of course they're going to say, well, yeah, this property is valued over $300 million, which Enya has falsely and irresponsibly put on their books. But Madam Chair, what the central bank did is realize, wait a minute, no. This is not right. The laws of the land and the judgment, and that's why the York family don't realize how amazing that judgment is for the country, because even the central bank woke up and said, wait a minute, after all these years of this false balance sheet being given to the central bank, it is clear that you are overinflating the value of Mullet Bay against the asset of Enya by making the inland waterway, or more than 50% of the land that we see here is being claimed to be owned when it belongs to St. Maarten, which inflated the value from 60 million, which is where the central bank has it, to $320 million. Do you understand by addition and subtraction what that means? It means that the valuation based on the central bank says that what rightfully belongs to St. Maarten is valued over $260 million. Yet we have all, as a country, just stood here and allowed that to happen. No more. Madam Chair, today, with the support of members of the National Alliance and the leader of my party, USP, Mr. Franz Richardson, we have submitted today a proposal for a parliamentary inquiry into this very matter. Because I believe that going back and forth with governments and politics and so on is not going to solve it. The strongest method, the strongest tool Parliament has to solve issues is an inquiry. And there has been no issue longer allowed to rot than the issue of Mullet Bay. And I would say, Madam Chair, those in VRAMI, and I will say straight, I know the opinion of Mr. Brown, and we've had this discussion. He's a very experienced person within the ministry. But with all due respect, his assertion that no, we can't just take the land and we can't do this and do that is simply incorrect. I like what I've heard and applaud the effort of the ministry, where they have now given lease agreements to the people that have licenses issued by the government to operate there. Because that's what it's supposed to be. If the Ministry of TIAT says, here you go, you can operate your restaurant, then the Ministry of VRAMI should follow suit and say, hold on, you're operating on government land, here's your lease agreement. That's a good, strong first step and a good, bold step by the members of the ministry that made that initiative, and I applaud that. But guess what? We have to do our part to put that into a stronger legal enforcement. And there is no other way, Madam Chair Lady, further than going into this, that will finally bring the evidence to light, that will finally allow us the funds we need to have the legal changes made to our civil code and legislation draft up, such as what I asked earlier. We don't have a beach ordinance in this country. One of the things MP Emmanuel reminded me of when we again at Parlatino, what did the Minister of Environment for Bolivia said? The most crucial thing to protect your environment is your laws. And we have to look at the laws that we have. But how are we going to draft these? How are we going to do it? With what method? This parliamentary inquiry that I have initiated will address all of those things. And that is why, Madam Chair, today I'm very proud to say that I've worked very hard to try to bring this here. A lot of members of parliament, a lot of people within the community have been a part of advising me through this process. It's a very extensive document and initiative, so I encourage all members of parliament to continue to read it. I've actually given it in advance to faction leaders to peruse it as well. But Madam Chair, I would encourage you as soon as possible with the request that was put in today for a public meeting to handle this issue. Let us not allow it to delay any further. I would like to see that by the end of the 30 weeks period that this parliamentary inquiry will do, that the good gentleman from the VROMI department can come here and show me all of this in green, the way it belongs. Because this belongs to the people of St. Maarten. The beaches and the inland waterways are ours. And we have to stand up for what is right and show the world. If investors feel scared because we take back land from an investor, well, then so be it, because then that's not the type of investor I want in my country. I don't want investors that feel they could come here and through political favors get land that does not belong to them. No, move on, go someplace else. But I know we can find proper, responsible ways and environmentally friendly ways to develop this property the way it should be for the benefit of our people. And that is what we have to do. The first step, Madam Chair, the first step, people of St. Maarten, is this parliamentary inquiry. And I hope that through this process, and once we initiate this and we come to the point where we take this bold move, that members of parliament will come together in a parliamentary inquiry commission and let's get to work on this issue and get Mullet Bay back to the people of St. Maarten. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. We continue with the list of speakers, and next on the speakers list was MP Peterson, not present for this meeting. So I continue with MP Doran and give MP Doran the floor. MP Doran. No need at this time. We continue with MP Tamara Leonard. MP Leonard. No need at this time. I continue with MP Christophe Emmanuel. MP Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And again, good afternoon to you, our Secretary, the Honorable Minister and his support staff, my honorable colleagues, and everyone who is watching and viewing here today. Good afternoon to everyone. Madam Chair, I must admit that, as I told the Minister earlier, I am pleased with his presentation, and I would say that it was well received by my person and the answers that came from your support staff. However, Madam Chair, I am still a bit troubled, and it doesn't sit well with me, the win-win situation that you made mention before in the first presentation concerning the shipyard NV and concerning ownership, concerning the letter that was sent. I'm still trying to grasp and come around this whole debacle, if we want to use those terms. Because, Madam Chair, you see, at one point in time, the former Minister of Finance sent this letter. And he sent this letter to the Council of Ministers, Madam Chair, where in this letter, the former Minister of Finance is alluding, and he made mention that on March 22nd, 2019, the St. Maarten Shipyard NV, of which the undersigned and managing directors of companies that are individually each minority shareholders, receive a letter from government dated March 21st, 2019. In this, he is made in mention and he's calling himself a minority shareholder. He's also calling himself a managing director. A minority shareholder and a managing director. And then, in the public, he made mention that, no, I'm just an advisor. I'm just an advisor. So it took me to go and do the research and try to figure out exactly the truth. So I went to and I got the information from the Chamber of Commerce. And concerning the shipyard envy, we have function, statutory director, title, managing director, name, Marine Management Consulting Envy. Nowhere do we see the former Minister of Finance, Michael Ferrier. So it takes me to say that the former Minister of Finance, Madam Chair, sent a letter to the Council of Ministers impersonating and saying that he is the managing director. But on the extract from the Chamber of Commerce, he's not. That's fraud. Or it can be deemed fraud. So which one is it that I keep asking over and over? You impersonate yourself or you make it to believe to the Council of Ministers, to the government of St. Maarten, to be someone regarding a parcel of land that you're not. That you're not. And that is punishable by law. Madam Chair, because of that, today I am bringing a motion, Madam Chair, because I'm not too comfortable and it doesn't sit well with me in terms of how the government is dealing with this issue. And I would like to present the motion. Draft motion. The Parliament of St. Maarten in its meeting of today, August the 13th, 2019, considering that the entity Shipyard NV has been responsible for the following pieces of government long lease land numbered by certificate of measurement 63/1993, 210/1993, 279/1993, 185/2006, 186/2006, 187/2006. That the right to the long lease of these properties has expired September 21st, 2018, almost 1 year ago. That correspondence from the airport CEO, Brian Mingo, to the Council of Ministers has indicated that the airport still considers it crucial that this and other parcels of land be put on the lease of the airport holding company, PJIAAH, to secure further expansion plans. That the minister in his letter dated March 21st, 2019, has informed Shipyard NV that the lease to these properties would not be renewed, especially considering the delinquency of payments from this entity. That in a letter to the Council of Ministers dated March 26, 2019, former Minister of Finance, Michael Ferrier, has acknowledged himself as one of the managing directors and shareholders of this property. That much of the information in the letter sent by Michael Ferrier to the Council of Ministers has been sent in false pretense, as evidenced by the Chamber of Commerce extract presented in today's Parliament meeting, and could be considered forgery. That the Penal Code, Section 2185 states, the person guilty of forgery in writing or impersonation shall be punished by imprisonment of up to 8 years or a fine of the 5th category if committed in authentic documents. That this company, Shipyard NV, and one of its self-reported managing directors, Michael Ferrier, has not lived up to its commitment to pay their lease and now owes the country in the excess of 1,250,700 guilders, and has shown no effort to make payments. That the government, in its urgent need of cash flow and payments of these arrears, would greatly help the coffers of government. Establishes that shipyard envy, to which Michael Ferrier claimed in his letter on March 26, 2019, he is a shareholder and director, owes the government over $1 million guilders, and he needs to go pay. That the former Minister of Finance has attempted to make use of his former position as minister and current relationship to the current government to, by means of his letter dated March 26, to strong-arm the Minister of Rummy to pull back his decision to cancel the lease of Shipyard Envy, which is in violation of Article 2, Section 185 of the Penal Code regarding false impersonation. Resolve to have the government disallow any situation from existing where Shipyard Envy ends up being the ultimate holder of the land as described in the certificates of a measurement in point 1 of this motion. To have the appropriate authorities investigate the possible abuse of power and or forgery of the former Minister of Finance, Michael Ferrier, and goes over to the order of the day. Copies of this motion, Madam Chair, to be sent to the Governor of St. Martin, the Government of St. Martin, the Parliament of Aruba, the Parliament of Curacao, the Government of Aruba, and the Government of Curacao. And I present the motion, Madam Chair. That will be all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Christophe Emmanuel. We continue, and I give the floor to MP William Marlin. MP Marlin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to you. A hearty good afternoon to Minister Miklos Gieterson and his support staff, members of Parliament, viewers and listeners at home. Madam Chair, I would like to thank the Minister for the answers provided. Unfortunately, it has taken again several months. And when I say again, not only by this minister, but it's habitual that when meetings are started, questions are posed, that months after we still do not have answers, and today we have been provided with answers. Madam Chair, I want to take these few minutes that I have in this second round down a different road. Down a different road in the sense of addressing an issue that I would call history kind of repeating itself. It is not identical to what has happened back then, but it is very much linked. Linked, I would say, through what people call in these terminologies, in these incidents, inside trading. Madam Chair, when someone sits and holds political office, sits in office, and knows about something that is coming down the road and uses that information to benefit themselves, their friends, and or their families. Madam Chair, we are still struggling in the 21st century to approve zoning plans for St. Martin. And some go about it by saying, what is there left to zone? We have built up the entire island, so there's nothing left to zone. But I can tell you, Madam Chair, there is still a lot that is not built up yet. There is still a lot. Probably we have more of St. Martin that is not built up than is built up. Most of our flat land has been built up, but yet not legally zoned. And then I take us back to the early 1970s, when some people sitting in here as members of Parliament were not even born yet. And probably some who may have been, or who are ministers, or who have been ministers, were not born yet. And the minister in this case is one of them. Madam Chair, in the early 1970s, when we were still part of the Netherlands Antilles, the then central government contracted a consultant, I think it was by the name of Penfold, and draft zoning plans, a volume of draft plans were prepared for St. Martin. And then St. Martin was what we would call pristine. And we see many pictures depicting areas in St. Martin that was completely kind of untouched. And of course, it can't stay that way. And how we look at some of the areas today, in the next 30 or 40 years, our children and grandchildren would be looking at a total different development. But Penfold, in his professional wisdom, drafted these zoning plans for the Island Council of St. Martin, for the government and for the Island Council to establish. And what did he specifically write about the airport area? In those days, Mr. Penfold wrote in these draft zoning plans that the location of the airport is the only suitable parcel of land for an airport on the Dutch side of St. Martin. And because of future developments, because of the future development of St. Martin, the airport naturally would need to expand. And we can't take it up and take it anywhere else. We can hardly talk about expansion toward the west, because then we are in the water. We can't do much expansion towards the east. We have done a little, but we are already bordering to the lagoon, and to the left and the right, or to the north and the south, we have the pond and we have the beach. But what did Penfold write? Because of this, do not give out any land around the airport area in long lease. This was the advice to government. This was the advice to government to take into account, to take to the Island Council, establish these zoning plans that St. Martin will be responsibly be developed, and that the government of St. Martin would not encounter any hindrance, and particularly any financial hindrance for the future. But lo and behold, what happened? Instead of protecting the interest of St. Martin, the then leader of government ensured that not one, not two, but more like 3, 4, or 5 of his children got parcels of land alongside the airport, and not in what we would call like a break lane, or not under conditions that when we need it, you return it to us, but was given in long lease, quietly, and nobody paid attention. And years after, when the airport now needs to expand, who are the first beneficiaries of this inside trading? The same very children of the then leader of government, leader of the Democratic Party. Parcels of land given in long lease to his children were bought back by the airport, not for a couple $1,000, not for a couple $100,000, but for several $1 million. And today, I raise this because a similar pattern is taking place again. One is in government, one is close to the circles of government, and one knows from discussions with the World Bank and with the Recovery Plan Bureau that we are going to need a parcel of land for the recovery of shipwrecks, and then we come forward. Ta-da! And minister, renew that lease. Minister, fix this thing for me. Minister, take care of this thing. Minister, take care of it. And even if you give it to the airport, give it to me and I go lease it to the airport. I'll give it to the airport and tell the airport, lease it to me. Let me work out something. And then you walk around and you promise the poor people whom land was leased from for several years and didn't get a penny, didn't get a dollar, didn't get a guilder. Hold on, bear with me. I got something big coming. And as soon as we sign off on it, I'm going to pay all of you. I'm going to pay all of you. This cannot continue. This cannot continue. And this is not others doing it to us. That is us, our own, doing it to our own. And to our own being our people. When the airport got to pay a combined, God knows how many, tens of millions, not guilders, dollars, to buy back land that had the Island Council of St. Martin in the early 1970s established those zoning plans as presented by Mr. Penfold, or at least adopted some of these proposals that were made, the airport would have been able to expand, and rather than being held hostage today by promises of the European Development Bank, by promises of the Dutch government, by insurance proceeds that the bondholders are holding on to, rather than being caught up in this fight, the airport would have been able, just like everybody else, where the airport is owned by government and the land there belong to government, our airport would have been able long ago to build its bypass, to build its extra taxiway, and develop in a responsible manner, and not to be now saddled under the yoke of hundreds of millions of dollars in debt because of insider trading that took place over 40, 45 years ago. Madam Chair, I thank you.
Thank you, MP William Marlin. I continue and I give the floor to MP Jules James.
Geen behoefte.
No need. We continue. According to the speakers list, we would have had MP Jacobs at this time. MP Jacobs is not present. I continue with MP Irian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to you, the Kafir, my colleagues, to the Minister and his support staff, and to those watching all different forms of media. Minister, again, as mentioned before, thank you for the presentation. It was very insightful. And I still have a couple of questions based on the presentation. You mentioned that 5.8 million guilders is what is currently collected, I believe, by Domain Affairs, and that with increased manpower and legislation, that it can double. When you mention manpower, do you mean increasing FTEs or filling the current vacancies within the department or the ministry? How many critical vacancies are there in relation to the specifically Domain Affairs in the ministry currently vacant? Another burning issue that you mentioned was the fact that there's a backlog at the receiver's office in terms of, I guess, monies in relation to Domain Affairs and ERFPAC. How much do you estimate we are losing by not finalizing this backlog? And just one thing that is currently, you see, trending right now also is the fact that I'm seeing complaints right now, in particular in the Don Beach area, that access to the public beaches are being blocked off. Minister, isn't there a law that there should be mandatory access to all public beaches? And what is the ministry doing concerning the access to public beaches and being blocked off? We just heard, for example, the statements from MP Bryson, and now we hear again in the Don Beach area, and a while ago I heard in Lowlands area also that the issues happening. What is the ministry doing in terms of giving maybe proper signage to access to the beaches and not allowing members of the public to block off the public access? That'll be all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Irian. Minister, we have come to the end of the questions as posed by members of Parliament. I will give you a few minutes to caucus on the responses to these questions. I will allow you to caucus for 5 minutes. Meeting adjourned for 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this meeting of Parliament, this public meeting during which the Minister has been responding to questions by members of Parliament regarding the topic of long lease / erfpacht of government. I now give the floor to the Minister, who will be responding to a few questions raised in the second round by members of Parliament. Minister Gittison, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you, first I would like to thank MP Bryson for the acknowledgements he made in the second round. I'd also like to thank MP Marlin for his elucidations that were noted. I only got questions really from MP Arian, which I will now answer. And of course, the motion was brought forward by MP Emmanuel. MP Arian asked, 5.8 million currently collected. When talking about manpower is needed, is it FTs or expansion of formation plan? How many critical vacancies are there at Domain? Madam Chair, I am referring to both. The current formation plan has 7 persons, and we have 4 persons currently working at the department, 3 of which are formally in service of the department. However, the vacancies are mainly administrative staff. The need for the department is for more policy workers type staff to better assist with the work needed. I refer to my initial presentation where I mentioned a decision to temporarily expand the staff with senior officers, but due to lack of budget, we have not been able to fill these positions. MP then asked, how much do we estimate we are losing by not finalizing the backlog? This is not possible to estimate effectively. However, in the past, the Ministry of Finance tended to budget about 20% below the amount that government should collect. So on an annual basis, I would suggest that this is the amount of the shortfall. Then the MP asked, access to public beaches is being blocked off, in particularly Dorm Beach and Lowlands. Is there a law on mandatory access to public beaches? There is currently no law that I am aware of to obligate access to a beach. The government usually needs to specifically regulate access to a specific beach by construction of roads, for example. In the past, this is a requirement that GROMI stipulated in planning permits for developers. At present, unless a general law is passed based on the civil code, the best option would be to stipulate this specifically in zoning plans. Madam Chair, this concludes the questions that were asked.
Thank you, Minister, for those responses. Does any member have the need for clarification from the Minister based on the answers given? There are no points of clarification to be raised. So thank you again, Minister Gittison. We do have a motion presented during this public meeting. One motion, and we will start with the handling of that motion. I will read the motion as presented.
Is there a reason why we don't have a copy of the motion? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, MP Jules James, for that question. The motion should have been distributed to all members. I guess that still will take place. you have raised a point of order. I just make note of that to establish in what context you raised the point, but it's a valid one. But yes, the motion will be distributed. In the meantime, I go on and read a motion. A draft motion. The Parliament of St. Maarten, in its meeting of today, August 13, 2019, considering that the entity Shipyard NV has been responsible for the following pieces of government long lease land numbered by Certificate of Admeasurement 63 of 1993, 2010 of 1993, 2079 of 1993, 185 of 2006, 186 of 2006, 187 of 2006. That the right to the long lease of these properties has expired on September 21st, 2018, almost 1 year ago. That correspondence from the airport CEO Brian Mingo to the Council of Ministers has indicated that the airport still considers it crucial that this and other parcels of land be put on the lease of the airport holding company PJIAH to secure future expansion plans. That the minister in his letter dated March 21st, 2019 has informed Shipyard NV that the lease to these properties would not be renewed, especially considering the delinquency of payments from this entity. That in a letter to the Council of Ministers dated March 26, 2019, former Minister of Finance, Mr. Michael Ferrier, has acknowledged himself as one of the managing directors and shareholders of this property. That much of the information in this letter sent by Mr. Michael Ferrier to the Council of Ministers has been sent in false pretense, as evidenced by the Chamber of Commerce extracts presented in today's Parliament meeting, and could be considered forgery. That Penal Code Section 185 states that the person guilty of forgery in writing or impersonation shall be punished by imprisonment of up to 8 years or a fine of the 5th category if committed in authentic documents. That is company Shipyard NV and one of its self-purported managing directors, Michael Ferrier, has not lived up to its commitment to pay the lease and now owes the country in excess of 1,250,700 guilders and has shown no effort to make payments. That the government is in urgent need of cash flow and payments of these arrears would greatly help the coffers of government. Establishes that Shipyard NV, to which Mr. Michael Ferrier claimed in his letter of March 26, 2019, he is a shareholder and director, owes the government over 1 million guilders and he needs to go pay. That the former Minister of Finance has attempted to make use of his former position as minister and current relationship to the current government to, by means of his letter dated March 26, to strong-arm the Minister of Romi to pull back his decision to cancel the lease of Shipyard NV, which is in violation of Article 2.185 of the Penal Code regarding false impersonation. Resolves to have the government disallow any situation from existing where Shipyard NV ends up being the ultimate holder of the land as described in the Certificate of Admeasurement in points 1 of this motion. To have the appropriate authorities investigate the possible abuse of power and or forgery of the former Minister of Finance, Mr. Michael Ferrier, and goes over to the order of the day. This motion has been signed by 6 members of Parliament. I can make out the signatures of MP Bryson, MP Richardson, MP Marlin, MP Erin, MP Doran, and MP Emmanuel. Copies of this motion to be sent to the Governor of St. Maarten, the Government of St. Maarten, the Parliament of Aruba, the Parliament of Curaçao, the Government of Aruba, and the Government of Curaçao. Before going over, however, to the voting on this motion, it is with a deep sense of condolence to our fellow Member of Parliament, Dr. Luc Mercelina, on the passing of his dad, his father, And as you might be aware, Marcelina, is no longer in the meeting of Parliament, but to him, his family, our sincerest condolences on the passing of the father of MP Luc Marcelina, and may his soul rest in peace. As I stated before that announcement, we are dealing with the matter of the motion that has been presented, and we go over to the voting on this motion as presented. Does anyone wish a so-called
Hoofdelijke
or roll call on the motion? A member has expressed the need for hoofdelijke stemming, so we will go over to make the necessary preparations for that. The meeting is not adjourned while we prepare for the voting on the motion. The number at which this voting would start is number 14, that does not have a member. Another number will be picked, that is number 6. And we start with the voting at MP Artwell Irian. MP Irian?
For.
Tamara Leonard.
Against.
William Marlin. Luc Marcelina. Franz Richardson.
For.
Rolando Bryson.
For.
Egbert Doran.
For.
Christopher Emmanuel.
Madam Chair, I would like to motivate my vote. And Madam Chair, my motivation is simply just to acknowledge, as you made mention a while ago, the passing of Luc's dad, and on behalf of the faction of the National Alliance, we would like to also extend our sincere condolences to our colleague, and may his soul rest in peace and be peace with his dad on the passing. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I vote for.
Jules James.
Madam Chair, certainly, if I may motivate, as I ask for the point of clarification, I don't even have a copy of the motion in front of me. You've read it out. And for my colleague Luke, condolence on the passing of his dad. And certainly, I wish him much strength. And this regard to the motion, I vote against.
Sarah Westcott Williams.
I vote against the motion. The result of the voting on the motion, we have 6 votes for the motion and 3 against. This motion, number 1 in this public meeting of today, is accepted. We have come to the end of the deliberations on this agenda point. I want to thank the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, Mr. Miklas Gitterson, and his entire support staff here for this meeting for providing the necessary information. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this meeting. I thank you for your participation, and I hereby close this meeting. Wishing everyone a good evening.